Good morning, everyone. Nick Beres here. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. It is indeed the day after the verdict in the Vanderbilt rape case. Our gavel-to-gavel coverage is concluded, but our coverage of the story has not ended. In fact, this morning we're going to follow up, which I think is appropriate after something that came down pretty much late yesterday afternoon. And we're going to open up the phone lines here in just a moment for you to join in the conversation. It's not often after such a strenuous trial and so much preparation, and when things finally wrap up, many of the attorneys involved, they take a break. You heard Tom Thurmond say yesterday after the fact he's going to take off and go someplace warm and relax for a bit after, being involved in such a high-profile case. But we're lucky this morning that we have one of the principals with us to talk about the case and take your phone calls and reflect on how everything went down. And this morning, we're joined by one of Brandon Vanderburg's attorneys, of course, Fletcher Long. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
Good to have you on, and I appreciate you coming on just one day after the verdict. And we'll have phone calls, I'm sure, for you from some of the viewers, 737-7587. So many people, Fletcher, followed this case closely, not just here, all over the country. We had viewers overseas. The fascination with the case, but locally, of course, the most viewership. The verdict came down yesterday as you were there in the courtroom. The jury came back after about 3 hours. Give me your take on it.
Well, I believe in the system. I mean, you try the best case that you can, you put on the best defense that you can, and then you let the exclusive finders of fact determine what the facts are. And I can't quibble with it. I obviously disagree with it. I mean that's, my take on it is different than theirs, but I mean, I fulfilled my role in the system, and they fulfilled theirs, and I don't have any reason to believe that they did anything but give us very careful consideration.
I thought yesterday in the morning was a clinic on excellent lawyering between you and Tom Thurmond. Just terrific closing. I thought Tom Thurmond's rebuttal was fantastic. It gave the jury a lot to think about. As you reflect back now, are there things you would have done differently? Or do you think it was just the video evidence was too overwhelming to compensate for?
Well, anytime that you lose, if you don't go through an analysis of I wish I had done something differently, you don't work on your craft enough probably to do what I do for a living.
Yeah.
So you always go through an analysis of what if I'd have done this, what if I'd have taken this approach, but I'm pretty confident that the strategy that we employed would have been the one most likely to meet with success with the jury that we had impaneled. Now, when it comes to jury selection, you got to remember that you're not just picking 12 people from the population of Nashville, you're picking 12 people from the veneer that they send up there or assigned to that courtroom for purposes of that trial. And sometimes the best 12 in the veneer are the ones that maybe you can keep out 3 hours, but maybe there's not 12 people in the veneer that are going to unanimously vote to acquit. You have to take your veneer as it comes, and I am confident that we seated a jury that gave us careful consideration of our particular defense as best as they were able in light of what they viewed as overwhelming evidence.
What did you observe when they delivered the verdict of the jurors? And I know you watched them closely.
Their reaction was very emotional. Now, after the verdict was announced, some of the jurors were weeped. It was clear. It was clear that they didn't want to hand down the verdict they did, but it was also clear that they felt like they had a legal duty to hand down the verdict they did. And again, I may disagree, but it doesn't matter what I think, because that wasn't my role. My role is to try the best defense. I mean, there really wasn't any offer in this case. It was a case that was going to have to be tried.
Never a plea.
I mean, if the offer is just plea to the indictment, well, then you should go to trial.
You have nothing to lose.
I don't know. Nobody's hired a criminal trial lawyer to tell them to just take their lumps and like it. That's not how the system works. It's an adversarial system. Tom Thurmond tried a wonderful case. I thought that his Sir rebuttal argument was outstanding. I thought it was maybe the best argument I've ever seen him give, and they call him the Terminator for a reason. It's not like he's a dog. I mean, this is a thoroughbred. This isn't a sway back nag. So.
Yeah.
Jill Norman and Roger Moore. I've tried numerous cases with Roger Moore, and it's always a strenuous endeavor.
Yeah.
Always. Roger's very bright. He's charismatic. He's very eloquent. Miss Norman was thorough. She obviously has a wonderful grasp of the technical issues that were presented to the jury. Chad Gish did a super job.
Wasn't he a good witness for them?
He's believable, he's credible, he tells the truth. Even when the truth doesn't necessarily help him, he tells the truth, and that's something to be admired.
Now, and you mentioned a witness there, and we all know that Corey Beatty did take the stand in his own defense. I know some people might wonder, did you ever consider putting Brandon up in his own defense, and can you tell us why you didn't?
Well, I felt like that it wouldn't be beneficial in Brandon's case to put him on, because there really wasn't video of him perpetrating any acts of penetration. And in a criminal responsibility case, I kind of think this law really incriminates actors who play minor roles to way too harsh of an extent. However, I'm also not a member of the legislature, and I can't do anything about the laws that they pass other than to try to come up with a theory that tries to minimize the impact to a defendant's rights to be judged fairly. Yeah. And, Brandon's role in this, encouragement being enough to make you criminally responsible, I don't read the law that way, but I wasn't also the exclusive judge of the law. That was the jury's purview. I, in my closing argument, told the jury why I didn't believe that it was enough, and I think if it was enough, Miles Finley should have been charged. But that was my theory. I threw that theory out. I'm sure they considered it, so we are where we are.
After you threw that out, we have a good way of measuring some of the reaction, not with the jury but the viewers, and it hit home. We had more than a few viewers email us to say that they were leaning very heavily toward conviction, and then when they heard it, they thought, well, that's right. In a way, these individuals were they told to do something, and how, they have responsibility for their own actions, not because someone told them to do it. They bought into it, but apparently the jury didn't.
Well, it took them 3 hours to reach a verdict, which in a trial that went as long as this one is significant, because the impetus for a jury that's had to hear this long of a case, and I must confess I've never tried a case that went this long, but there had to been some impetus to let's get this over and go home. I mean, the fact that they wanted to work on Martin Luther King Day is an indication that they were frustrated about the length that this case was taking. But it took as long as it took, and I feel like that Mr. Robinson and Mr. Perez and I fought every piece of evidence to the fullest extent, and we gave our clients the best chance that they could have when the jury went back to deliberate. All a trial lawyer can do is make the case look better from the stand than it looks sitting in his file, and I think we did that.
We're talking about two young men here that I think maybe, while they understood certainly the gravity of the situation, didn't understand everything happening in court. After the verdict came down, we were watching here, and I saw at one point in the aftermath, you were up and Brandon was there, and you guys spoke briefly. Did he ask you a question? What did you tell him at that point? Did he understand really fully that at that moment his bond was revoked and he was going to jail, or what kind of things did you say right afterwards? Maybe you don't even remember. I remember you got up and turned and he was talking to others, and then there was a brief interaction between the two of you, and don't know, what did you call what you said or what that was about? Yeah.
Well, I believe that what he tells me at that point is probably privileged and something I cannot share.
Okay. But
I don't have a specific recollection of what it was. We may have been discussing what the appellate remedies would be from this point moving forward. I don't know.
Okay.
But I can't get into the mind of Mr. Vandenberg any more than I felt that any jury could get into the mind of Mr. Vandenberg. I didn't feel like that the government had proven that he acted with an intent to promote or assist the commission of an offense. The only direction, as I argued, that I felt that he gave applied to a count that had already been committed prior to his giving direction. I don't know how you aid and abet a completed offense, But, you know, there again, I think I was pretty clear in that theory, and I think I spelled it out, and I think this jury was smart, and they heard it. But if they reject it, they reject it. That's our system.
Let me ask you this real quickly. If the prosecution did not have the video evidence, what kind of case do they have?
Well, I don't think the case gets tried because without the video evidence, you've got a victim that doesn't remember. You've got
no DNA.
You don't have any DNA. You have a physical, medical, legal exam that doesn't disclose any signs of trauma or injury.
Witnesses that aren't the most credible.
You've got witnesses that are terribly incredible, and I don't mean that in the superlative sense. And so I don't think the case gets tried without the video. And I think it's a real lesson to young people about videoing. I think that there needs to be some circumspection, and I'm not making a comment on this case particularly. I'm just making a general comment that you know, these videos, you know, you may think that you've deleted them, but Chad Gish can go get them. I mean, you may think that they're deleted, but apparently they're not. And you know, so I think this was a perfect storm. I think that this spiraled out of control. I think that there were bad, you know, but I can tell you that when Mr. Beatty and Mr. Vandenberg signed with Vanderbilt University certified and heralded them as men who not only had the athletic prowess to wear the black and gold, but also the moral fiber, character, and ethics of a student at Vanderbilt should have. I wasn't at that press conference, but I bet that's what they related upon obtaining their signatures. And there really are some hard questions here about what type of support systems they have in place to protect athletes from being in the very situation in which these athletes, and all of them, Vanderwall, you know, Retta, all of them, you know, what kind of a situation in which they found themselves, and what is Vanderbilt doing to try to prevent this from occurring, because they do have an obligation to these students that pay them what amounts to a hefty sum of money for the privilege of obtaining a degree from that fine institution.
Yeah, and you know what? I said it before too. It happened at Vanderbilt, but that happens at college campuses across the country where there are concerns about this kind of thing. And
every college campus should be concerned about it. Every college campus should be implementing these support structures and systems. I mean, you've got 1,200 cameras recording incidents. Who's on the other end? I mean, you've spent for this system. Who's watching the other end of this camera? Maybe it should be someone.
All right, we got to take a break on that note. When we come back, as you can imagine, there are a lot of people with questions. So many people followed this trial. A chance to ask you a question is a big deal. We'll take care of that when we come back right after this break. Stay with us.